Think of the happiest things. It's the same as having wings.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Today on Baseball by Design, we're going to be talking about the Triple-A Rochester Red Wings, an affiliate of the Washington Nationals. Of course, they play in Rochester, New York. Later on in this episode, we'll be talking with designer Dan Simon, who created their current logo. And Baseball by Design wildlife correspondent Ranger Amy Burnett will be here to talk about birds. And then Dan Simon will be back, of course, with one of his Studio Simon Stumpers. Right now, I am so pleased to have Naomi Silver, who is the president, CEO, and COO of the Rochester Red Wings on the Baseball by Design podcast. Naomi, good morning. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much.
The Rochester Red Wings are a stalwart of minor league baseball. They have been around. We were just chatting. They've been around for almost 100 years. They've had some different logos, but that nickname, Rochester Red Wings, predates a certain hockey team by 2 years. So the Rochester Red Wings were obviously around before the Detroit Red Wings were around. Before we get into some of the logos and some of the history of the team, what does the name Red Wings mean? Why is a baseball team in Rochester, New York called the Rochester Red Wings?
Great question. We were originally owned by the St. Louis Cardinals. So the bird with the red sort of resonated with people. And as they ran a contest to name the team, as we still do today, those types of things, just to engage the fans, and someone came up with the names. So it has stuck. You know, when you're in business as long as we have been, those names really they become sort of ingrained in the community and beyond in the baseball world. You know, people recognize the name. It means a lot. It means a lot to us.
You often don't see teams, from the early 1900s having logos specifically, right? Like, normally there's a team name and there might just be some, a block text on a jersey. There is a logo ascribed to the Rochester Red Wings from 1929 to 1947 that's basically a baseball with some literal red wings on it. Do you have, is there evidence that that was actually the team's logo back in, way back when this team was founded in 1929?
Yeah, and there have been variations of that, but my first familiarity with that, the ball with two wings, a wing coming out of each side, is really when the team became Rochester Community Baseball and became a publicly held company, closely held and community owned, in the 50s. So prior to that, you are correct. I'm not sure exactly what the logo was, but it was an iteration of a ball with wings over the many years.
How long have you been with the team?
Well, I've been with the team all of my life. It's my family. It's in my family. My father took over the team in the 50s and actually held that stock drive. So I've been with the team since I've been an adult, but of course was around the team until it became my career.
Well, that's amazing. I absolutely love that. What was that like as a kid growing up around a minor league baseball team?
It was wonderful, but it was my father's work. Mm-hmm. So it was a little different for me than I think most kids coming to games. It was part of life. And, as a kid, what you grow up with does not feel unusual. It is your life. So my parents were both very dedicated to the community, and being in baseball, as you know, allows a certain involvement in the community like no other. 75 times a year, we're with all of our 500,000 friends. It's a wonderful life, and it's just an experience that's tremendous, growing up and even as an adult.
That is amazing that this is a family business and you've been around it your whole life. I absolutely love that part of the story. Speaking of teams that have a certain amount of longevity, is there a sense of rivalry, or if you hear teams named that have been around a long time, is there a sense of rivalry where you want Rochester? If you hear someone talking about obviously the Durham Bulls, the Birmingham Barons, the Buffalo Bisons, who are not that far away from you, some minor league teams that have just been around forever and ever and ever. Obviously, Rochester is one of those. Is that something that you want to make sure that you're included with that sort of pantheon of teams?
Well, we have been around longer than any other professional organized minor league sport, so baseball and other sports. So I feel like no rivalry there. I think people appreciate the fact that we've been around so long because most teams have gone broke, been sold, moved out of town. So I wouldn't call it a rivalry. I think we get that respect in Rochester. I take no credit for that. That was before my time that, there was a risk of losing the team. But honest to goodness, in baseball, and probably in other sports, I can only imagine, there's no real rivalry. We are so appreciative of any success that another team has because, the success breeds more success. The more people are talking about baseball and what a fun experience it is at the major league level or the minor league level, we all benefit from that. We all learn from each other. So it's kind of cool. You don't have any direct rivalry with another team in your same city. Once a team is in another city, it's not rivalry.
Mhm.
It's appreciation for what they do.
I've always loved how collaborative minor league baseball is that way. It's because it's so community based. Each individual community succeeding, the rising tide lifts all boats. That is for sure.
You're so right. I couldn't agree more.
The history of the logos here with this team in the 80s, there was a very like 1980s feeling Red Wings type. Then in 1997 is the introduction of two things, the color yellow into the brand and this bird character. And then from 1997 to 2013, you had that logo. And then in 2014, you introduced the logo that exists now, created by Dan Simon, who will be on this episode a little bit later on. The character himself, that was 1997, like I said. What was the thinking in for the team in going from these, sort of baseball and wings to an actual red bird character for a logo?
I think it was, we were looking to do something that was a little more fun, something that people would look at and say, that's very clever. As you well know, logos and team names have changed and become something that I would never have imagined years ago. But maybe we were leaning in that direction so that we could stay current and introduce something new that would be interesting for a new demographic, more fun and more, exciting or kid friendly, all of that.
So I wrote about this brand for sportslogos.net back in 2017, and I tell a story in this article about you and Dan Simon meeting in 2012 at the winter meetings. Do you recall that meeting with Dan?
I do, absolutely.
And he said that the two of you discussed that the current logo was looking a little, quote, long in the tooth. Those are his words, I think, not yours, at least as I have it in the article. That decision to rebrand with what is now the current logo, what was the thinking in that?
First of all, I was really grateful to meet him because I was thinking about doing this, but wasn't sure where to go with it. But Dan's experience with minor league teams just made it all make sense to me. Things do change and you do see a stylistic change that's happening around you. And it felt like it was time. Softer, rounder kinds of lines in the logo. And we were pretty committed to our logo, which is also our mascot is based upon that logo. We call him Spikes. And so we wanted to stick with that because he is such a fan favorite, but it needed that modernization. And, one thing we know is that you have to stay current. People have got to have an appreciation as generations go. You have to feel like you can't allow yourself to become outdated, because then you're battling to get back to the level that you were hoping never to have lost. So if you stay ahead of that game, I think you're much better off. He was brilliant in what he offered us.
Well, we know that to be true on this podcast. Dan is obviously a regular on Baseball by Design, so we'll ask him about his brilliance in the next in the next segment here. One of the ways that you all have stayed current that has been a lot of fun for me as someone who gets to write about minor league baseball logos and branding. You have a number of fun alternate identities, and one really very meaningful one. So I want to talk about a few of these. I'll mention that you did the moon rocks to commemorate the eclipse. That was very cool. And you played another team who had a space themed identity.
That's correct. And yes, and that was just so much fun. Anytime you can do something like that, it's just a unique and exciting experience, and the players love it.
That was certainly a fun one. It had an astronaut version of your current logo, so that was definitely a fun play on a current event like that. And the lunar eclipse is like, what a cool thing that is, right? Now I'm questioning myself. It was a solar eclipse, I think.
It was a solar eclipse, yeah. And we played as the Moon Rocks the weekend prior to the date of the eclipse, and the day of the eclipse was actually a non-game day. So we had a special event at the ballpark that day, and yeah, it was great fun.
That is very cool. Going back to 2017, one of the really fun sort of food frenzy based alternate logos out there in the world of minor league baseball, you played as the Rochester Garbage Plates. You chuckled as I said that. For the uninitiated, what is a garbage plate? It looks amazing.
It is amazing. It's the Rochester invention many years ago by a place called Nick Tahoe's. And it is, if I can get this right, it is a layer of mac salad. It is 2 hot dogs or 2 hamburgers, or maybe one of each if you're really going to step outside the box. It is chili, fried hash browns, and hot sauce on top of that. Of course, some people like mustard and ketchup. To me, it is indigestion on a plate, but it's a very popular dish here. So we did play as the plates, and had a jersey with those layers showing on the lower half of the jersey, so you could see cartoonish type of layering. Hysterical. The hat also had a logo, a plates logo, and we sold plates merchandise all over the country. It was not only the Rochesterians but the former Rochesterians. So it was very cool, very fun.
Another one, and this is I love learning these details about these towns and some of the by our perspective ancient history here. Another alternate identity was the Rochester Hop Bitters, which was a throwback to the 1879 and 1880 Rochester baseball team of the National Association. Hop bitters, I think of beer, but it's not beer. It's something else. It was a medical elixir, they say. What is a hop bitter?
I think it was a snake oil type of thing, but fun, funny and fun. And, the promotion that we do surrounding these identities can be really fun. It's just a takeoff on these things. That's, it gives us something to do during the off season when we're planning for the season.
You have another one, the Rochester Lilacs. This is not the most ferocious of alternate identities, I don't think. But how come you all are playing as the Lilacs?
We have Rochester is known for its lilacs, and people actually come here from all over during the May week when the lilacs are in bloom. We are affiliated with the Washington Nationals, and the Washington Nationals have an identity of the cherry blossoms. They wear a cherry blossom hat and jersey, and it was tremendously successful. And the woman there on their staff in Washington who designed that jersey for them created the Rochester Lilacs jersey and hat for us. And it is the colors are purple, obviously. It's lilac, which is, not at all what we typically wear. And so it was really kind of fun. And that is one of the things that these other jerseys allow us to do, these other identities allow us to do, is to maybe wear colors that we don't typically wear, and to, it sparks an interest in people who maybe, are looking for something different. But the lilac jerseys were fantastic. Really a great looking jersey and one of the players' favorites. And, when we do that, we often wonder how the players are going to react to what we're asking them to wear. The lilacs we were a little worried about, but they were so good looking. The players really enjoyed it.
My experience is that people who worry, that the players are going to be concerned about something being too silly or not masculine enough or whatever, that they're often, projecting rather than, the players themselves seem to enjoy. That's been my experience anyway.
I think you may be right about that.
Well, and then the last one I want to ask you about to comment on here is a really significant one, and it's a very cool thing that you did where you wore American Sign Language on Deaf Culture Day, and so the jersey itself had the hand formations that spelled out Red Wings on the jersey. And I know a few teams have done this, but I think that's such a cool promotion. What made you all think to do that?
We have a wonderful school here, Rochester Institute of Technology, that has a deaf student population there in a deaf school. And it's a second in size only to Gallaudet University, which I think is, famous for its deaf population. It was just very meaningful for us to be able to give them a night where we wear our jerseys and our hats that say Red Wings, and we have signers at each of the concession stands, and really try to do all that we can to make this this very much community oriented organization do something for that community, like we do. We'll have Irish night, and we'll have LGBTQ night, and everyone should feel welcome coming here. And we know that those smaller populations don't always have every opportunity in the world to feel welcome and to have the same experience the rest of us do. But when we close caption things that day at the ballpark, it's appreciated. So we love doing that.
100% agree. I really appreciate that you said all of that. And yeah, absolutely. These to make specific communities feel welcome is a way to make everybody feel welcome. So I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you.
Well, Naomi, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for hopping on and talking about this historic Rochester Red Wings brand and all of these fun alternates that you've been doing in the last decade or so. This is what a fun brand. Absolutely, must get out to Rochester to see a baseball game at some point. You also do a very good job, I should point out, with all of your ice cream helmets. You've got a nice selection of ice cream helmets with the various logos on them. So as any fellow collectors out there should know that Rochester has some good helmets for ice cream. Naomi, where can people find the Red Wings online? Where can people go get some of this great merchandise that you all have?
Yeah, just search on Red Wings Baseball, and you will find us, redwingsbaseball.com. And retail is, it's the name of the game these days. People love it. So happy to be here with you today, Paul, and my best to Dan.
I will say hello to Dan in the very next segment here. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. And best of luck in the coming season. That we are on the doorstep of the 2025 season at the time of this recording. So best of luck with the coming season.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, welcome back. As always, I am thrilled to have my good friend Dan Simon on the podcast. Dan, we are so close to our Anadanapalooza road trip that we take. That's coming up in the very near future. In the meantime, we're here talking about your Rochester Red Wings. Good morning. Hello. How are you?
I am fantastic, but let's back up a second.
Oh, okay.
Listeners, you should know that the host of this podcast you are currently listening to is an amazing trip planner. I don't know if it's just in him. He's had lots of practice. You do know he does a road trip with his former college mates called the Baseball Palooza road trip. Do you do all of the hotel and travel once you hit the ground?
Actually, I don't do the hotels. My friend Steve does the hotels. What I will do is when the schedules start coming out for all the teams, I will put together an itinerary. I will put together multiple itineraries in different parts of the country, usually spread out over 2 or 3 different weekends in August. And then, there's not an actual vote, but we just sort of arrive at a consensus. So I'll plan out the whole route and the games, and I get the tickets for the games. But Steve does the hotels. So I share the logistics responsibility. I also rent the van every year, which is sometimes a hassle.
Well, for our trip, Paul Caputo has arranged the hotels. And for our upcoming trip that you just mentioned, you found a hotel in Columbus, Georgia
Hmm.
that looks amazing.
Yeah, it
It's
looks
like,
super cool, doesn't it?
yeah, it's a boutique hotel. It looks like it's maybe from some old factory or some kind of old building. It looks super cool. I'm like really excited. I'm excited always about the trip, period, but just to stay at that hotel, I'm really looking forward to that.
And walking distance to the ballpark.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
just know is not only is Paul Caputo an amazing podcast host, he's an amazing baseball road trip planner. So thank you for doing that.
Dan, you are too kind. And you, as evidenced by your decades of success in this profession, are an amazing logo designer.
You
And
see what he just did there, everybody? He swings things back just casually, like he does this every day. Oh, well, he does it every week. So,
one of these amazing logos, Dan, that you have created, what an interesting project. The Rochester Red Wings, as we've discussed on this episode already, have been around for a long, long time. Their name predates the hockey team of the same name in Detroit. You were tasked with the responsibility of creating a brand that felt like it had been there all along. How do you start a project like that? How do you go into creating a brand for a team that has been around for almost a century at that point?
well, the whole thing started at baseball winter meetings in 2012 or 2013. I know just based on my files that I was working on this project. Yeah, it would have been 2012. And I used to have a booth at the trade show, and the trade show was over. I remember everybody was breaking down their booths. So for me, the trade show was over, and I was standing at a nearby trade booth of somebody who I knew, and we were just shooting the breeze. And Naomi Silver, the president of the Red Wings, came by to talk to that person. I think it was doesn't matter, but I think it was a mascot company. So I was introduced to her, and I got into a conversation with her, and I said, you should update your identity. I think, frankly, I was just trying to get business, but I was also being genuine. I said, you've had this logo that's been around for a while. If you do a brand update, this is a great opportunity to freshen things up and send a message to your fans that we're on top of things. New things are always going on. And I think that resonated with her. And a short while later, I got a phone call from her and she said, let's do this. And so, getting back to your question about how do you take a brand that is ensconced in the community and not completely blow it up and do something new, because like I said, it was ensconced in the community, but it was also beloved. So what we wanted to do was keep the things that were working about it and freshen it up, like we've done with other brand identities that we've mentioned, the Greensboro Grasshoppers, is a really good example of that. Going back even further is, Toledo Mud Hens, creating new things but being true to the past, and that's what we endeavor to do with this.
First, Dan, I should say that listeners of this podcast will be well familiar with Naomi Silver because she was the first guest on this episode. So we've chatted with Naomi, and we got that story of the conversation you all had at the winter meetings way back when, on from her perspective as well here. So it's fun to hear that story from two different perspectives there. This character that you created is a much more contemporary version of the brand that they had from 97 to 2013. What's the process for you in terms of making this stand out from the other bird logos that are out there, either ones that you've created or that you've not created? Do you look at those? Do you study those? Or do you create something and then go and look and see, okay, is this too close to something that already exists?
The former. For any sports branding professional, one needs to be aware of what's already out there on the sports branding landscape, not just in baseball, but in all sports. And that also includes collegiate athletic programs. And frankly, birds and birds of prey are the most ubiquitous creatures used in sports branding: eagles and hawks
Go birds.
and falcons, and on and on and on. So I need to be aware of what's out there and do my best to make sure that the bird I'm doing for whichever team I'm working for, in this case, the Red Wings, it has to look different. Now, when I first made the first presentation on this, I had redone the face of the bird. It did not look like their existing bird. And Naomi liked the logos, but she said one change we need to make is we want this to look like our mascot. So the face was redone to look like their mascot.
So previous versions of this bird were pretty detailed and pretty like specific to an era. And what I mean by that is this bird from the late 90s looks like he's on steroids. I mean, he looks like a Mark McGuire, at least the version I'm looking at, like from 1998, looks like Mark McGuire, basically. When you're creating a brand like this, how do you go about making him timeless so that it doesn't, you don't look at it and like automatically go like, oh yeah, that's very clearly the late 90s.
Well, there's two things you're kind of bringing up here. One is the size of his arms, which you would associate with the steroid era. But then you're also talking about a time when logos were not necessarily given the thought that they are today. And when I say the thought, one of the things that's one should always consider, even back then, but it just wasn't that big of a deal back then for whatever reason, is our practical applications. And the most notable of those practical applications is embroidery at small sizes, like left chest on a polo shirt. Polo shirts are a staple of minor league baseball front office attire. Everybody who works in minor league baseball has a polo with the logo embroidered left chest. And that's the smallest application. You also have embroidery applications on a cap, but you've got a 3-inch height maximum, and that's a pretty decent size. You don't have 3-inch high embroidery left chest on a polo shirt. I want the primary logo to be embroiderable if at all possible. So I endeavored to really pare down the visual information in the primary logo so that it would embroider and also just work when reduced to a small size, even if it's not embroidered. So that's half the answer to your question: simplification of shape and form, and heavier outlines and things like that, so they would embroider better. But also, you mentioned the arms. Now, you described to your listeners the primary logo, where you mentioned that the bird has a bat on his shoulder. But there's also a secondary logo, which the Red Wings previously had, where the bat's behind his neck and both arms are draped over the bat. So there's an update of that logo as well. And if you look at that one, he's got decent sized arms, not quite as huge as they were in the original one. But then there's also a bird only secondary logo that's the bird from the primary logo. Boy, being that this is an audio medium, this is one of the difficult things about an audio podcast is we're talking about something visual.
Yes.
And you do a good job of describing these things, but you can't show every logo. There is this secondary logo that it's basically the primary logo minus the type. So you see in the primary logo, the type's going over, you see his shoulder above the type and the feathers of the wing below the type. But there's a secondary logo where that type is taken away and you see his entire arm, and it's a pretty good size arm. So he may have been off the steroids at this point, but he still was hitting the weight room.
I like that. Dan, one last question about this, just because it's a detail that is interesting to me. As you know, I am a fan of the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. Go Birds. The Philadelphia Eagles logo is notable in the NFL for facing left rather than right. Most logos in the NFL face to the right. Your logo here, the logo that you created, the primary logo, faces to the left. But in the logo that you were describing, where the secondary logo, where the bird has the bat over both shoulders, you switched it. He was facing to the left, and in your version, he's facing to the right. Do you know why you did that? Why would you switch the direction that the bird was facing when you updated that logo?
If my answer is I have no idea, is that an acceptable answer?
We'll leave it in. We'll say goodbye, and we'll move on to the Stumpers.
To be honest, if you hold on a second, what I'm doing now, listeners, I am looking through my old file from the first round presentation here.
It's great.
And in my presentation, one direction, the bird is looking straight at the viewer. The next direction, he's looking to the right. And then this direction, he's looking to the left. And I cannot tell you why I did that and why it ended up that way.
This is the kind of insight that we love to have in the Baseball by Design podcast, the kind of light we're trying to shed on all of these projects. With
the understanding, cut me some slack. This project started 12 years ago. A lot has happened between now and then.
Dan, between the two of us, it kind of feels like some of our descriptions of these logos started about 12 years ago. Dan, this is always fun. And guess what? You're going to be back. As we've said before, parting does not have to be such sweet sorrow, because we're going to hear from you again on this very episode, probably after we go talk to Ranger Amy about just what kind of bird we're looking at here and, what are the qualities of a red bird, or a red-winged bird, I should say, that makes it a good baseball logo. In the meantime, Dan, have a great several minutes until we talk again. We'll see you shortly.
See you in a couple.
Baseball by Design listeners worldwide, it is my honor to introduce to you the official Baseball by Design wildlife correspondent, musical enthusiast, and national anthem extraordinaire, Ranger Amy Burnett.
All right, everyone, welcome back. First of all, thank you again to Pat Larson for that great Ranger Amy introduction.
My friend Pat.
Pat Larson of the Minor League Baseball Hat
He's
History Series.
awesome.
Ranger Amy, this is the second week in a row. You're back.
It's so much fun. Well, you have to have me come and talk about birds because I'm such a bird nerd.
This is a bird episode. You're here talking about red birds in particular. Well, not the Memphis Redbirds, but rather the Rochester Red Wings. It's not a secret. They're called the Red Wings because they were a Cardinals affiliate. They have not been a Cardinals affiliate for a long time, but this bird is essentially a cardinal.
But Cardinals have lots of nicknames, so Red Bird, Red Wings. Red Wings is not as common as Red Birds. Everyone knows, especially in the South, there are a lot of people would call them Red Birds instead of Cardinals.
But we're not talking about Red Birds. We're talking about Red Wings.
We're talking about Red Wings.
And not the hockey team.
Not the hockey team.
The baseball team.
But when you said red wings, I was like, why are we talking about red-winged blackbirds?
Huh?
Because to birders, red wings, we think about red-winged blackbirds.
Would red-winged blackbirds make a good baseball mascot?
They would because they're really flashy.
Huh?
And they flash those. They're called epaulets on their wings. And they basically puff up and then sing. And one thing that's pretty cool about red-winged blackbirds is that they're kind of aggressive, and one male will take like 15 women as female birds as mates, and the other women don't care. And he'll just basically mate with up to 15 other birds. In contrast, cardinals.
Let's talk about cardinals.
Talking about,
yeah,
they're monogamous.
Huh?
So they're known to be monogamous. And I was like, I'm not sure if that makes a great baseball player.
Well, they could throw with both arms. Oh, that's not monogamous.
But people love cardinals because they're a symbol of love and devotion. But then there are also things that kind of go with baseball, like passion and power and things like that cardinals represent to people. One thing that is, everyone loves a cardinal. Do you know why? Especially in the Northeast, which is where Rochester is.
Okay.
Because in the middle of winter, when everything is really dreary, and spring and baseball season seems so far away, cardinals are like a punch of color in a gray sky. And so people, and on the snow, people just love cardinals. So it's kind of fitting, I think, that this team is called the Red Wings.
How common is the cardinal?
Super common.
Okay.
But people always think that they're rare.
Oh.
But I also hear people say, oh, I saw a cardinal. You know what that means? And I'm like, yeah, it means that there's a cardinal in your yard. And they'll be like, no, it means that someone is visiting me who has died. And
where does that come from? The someone's visiting me.
Someone is visiting me. And then if you take it one step further, there's the someone that is visiting me is actually someone who's come back from the dead. And that's actually based on a Cherokee legend.
Huh.
So it's kind of cool to think about. People really love their cardinals. Do you know that there are a number of states with cardinals as their state bird?
Really?
Guess how many?
How many states have cardinal as their state bird? I'm going to say 12.
That's a little overshot.
Oh, well, so you set me up for that.
I did.
Yeah.
It's actually 7.
7's still a pretty good number.
It's still a pretty good number.
That's 14% of all the states.
Those states, you want to know which ones?
Okay, the 7 states where cardinal is the state bird. Missouri.
No, I might just run them down.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay. Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, Ohio, Virginia, and where I went to school for 1 year, West Virginia. There's a movement afoot by ornithologists to get those states to change their bird to something that's more appropriate, or at least more like indicative of their state, rather than just being like, hey, we really like this red pretty bird.
But not New York, where the Rochester Red Wings play.
Isn't that funny?
And not Missouri, where the St. Louis Cardinals play.
No, so it's not the state bird in either one of those states, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
But people just really love seeing, they see cardinals as a symbol of hope. That red color pops in the winter, and they're like, baseball season is right around the corner when they see that red. But I also found some interesting stuff about the color red. And you, being a graphic artist, probably know a lot of stuff about the color red. But there was this cool research study that I found, reported by the BBC. In 2004 Olympics, they arbitrarily chose one team of boxers to be blue and one to red. Do you know what happened?
The red ones won because blue suppresses energy and red is energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah.
You already knew that one.
I didn't know that study, but it
Red
was not that hard to
intimidates.
guess. Yeah.
But it's one of the most visible colors on the spectrum, and that's why it's really revered and so special, and people use it a lot.
Do you know what the next color is beyond red on the spectrum of visible colors?
No. What is it?
Infrared. You can't even see it.
Whoa.
That's how high energy red is. Go one color further past red, and it's infrared.
So cool.
Yeah. How about at the other end of the spectrum, violet? Do you know what the next color is beyond violet?
No.
If you go from red to infrared,
Infraviolet.
ultraviolet,
Ultraviolet.
that's right. Also not visible on the spectrum. It exists. Isn't that weird that there are colors on the spectrum that exist, but we can't see them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why if you put those window clings on your sliding glass doors, and
Oh, yeah.
they birds can see that ultraviolet color.
Yeah.
And they won't hit your windows because they see the decal in 3D. You just have to look for the ultraviolet window clings.
Cardinals as a bird, what are their primary, aside from their redness, something I share with them? What are their primary sort of physical attributes?
They are one of the first birds in the morning to start singing.
Oh.
And they're one of the last birds at night to stop singing.
Oh.
So I don't know.
How annoying.
But they have a beautiful song. So
okay.
They have a beautiful voice. They like to sing. They're pretty brightly colored. They're monogamous. None of these things are really great baseball attributes, but that's what they are. And they're one of the most recognizable birds, I would say, in the country.
Okay, so you say they're not intimidating, though. They're not, that intimidating as a mascot. We're looking at the logo right now, this Dan Simon creation.
Yep.
And you've got this bird here, and he's got a bat on his shoulder and this sort of menacing look.
Yeah.
And he's got a black cap with a red brim on it, and he's looking sideways. He's giving sideways glance at the viewer. His arms pretty big. Mm-hmm. Not as big as they used to be in the old steroid days, but pretty big, and he looks pretty menacing. Are we saying this is that the baseball team has mischaracterized Red Wing Cardinal birds?
No, I think that's a pretty good indication, actually, of when people see a red cardinal, they're like, whoa, it draws attention. It's impressive. It's beautiful, and it's powerful. And I think it's kind of cool that guy has a black cap, because cardinals have a black mask, and then they've got that top knot on their head that they can raise and lower if they're wanting to look a little bit more intimidating.
All right, one last question, Ranger Amy.
Okay.
There's a lot of birds out there,
A lot of birds.
as evidenced by the fact that there's a lot of sports teams with bird-based logos. Go Birds. Is there a bird out there that you don't recall seeing as a sports logo that you think would be a fun sports logo?
Ooh, I think someone should be the vultures.
Oh.
Because, there isn't really anything more intimidating than a vulture that's looking down on you, like looking for dead things.
Have I told you about the time I was boarding an airplane and there was a vulture right in front of me boarding the airplane?
Oh my gosh.
And he had his dinner with him and he was bringing it on the airplane. And the gate agent was just like, I'm sorry, you're going to have to check that. And he said, no, it's carry on.
That's horrible.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Dan, we've had some coffee. We did some jumping jacks here. We got ready. We're renewed and refreshed for a Studio Simon Stumper. Good morning. How are you doing?
I am still fantastic. Thank you. It's kind of interesting, as I was trying to come up with an idea for this stumper, it occurred to me, you mentioned in our conversation that this is a team that shares a name with a hockey team, the Detroit Red Wings. And it occurred to me, I asked you a stumper based on hockey team names that minor league teams share.
I think it was all the professional sports, because I remember we had astute listeners pointing out to us that we had missed the Columbus Clippers and Los Angeles Clippers. And when I pointed it out to you, you told me, well, I'm a flawed human being.
which I, which is indeed the case. And I think part of our conversation that preceded this pointed to that. So today's stumper is going to be along the same lines, but
Okay.
will be different stumpers. So today's studio's Simon Stumper asks, which of these NHL team names was most recently a minor league baseball team name? Was it A, Islanders, B, Stars, or C, Rangers?
Well, you have the Huntsville Stars, who jump out at me as the first one I can think of. So, and I know the Las Vegas Stars were another one. The Islanders and the Rangers, I'm having trouble placing when they were actual team names. So I'll probably be annoyed when I hear when they were. But since I know that Stars has been used, and it's been used in my lifetime, in my recent memory, I'm going to go Stars.
And that is the correct answer.
Hot diggity.
So one of the difficulties of researching this stumper is first of all, Stars is the correct, like I said, is the correct answer, and that's as recent as 2014. So for me, that's like yesterday. For fifth grade Will, maybe not so much. Heck, I've been to a Huntsville Stars game, so that's certainly, it just seems recent to me, even though I went to that game in 1994, so that's not as recent. So, but they played in the Double-A Southern League, I think mainly as an Oakland A's affiliate in Huntsville from 1985 through 2014. Now, the Islanders, this is a team that fascinates me because that was the Hawaii Islanders. Like just that there was a team in Hawaii, and it wasn't, you would think the travel of that would have made that, at the very least, it's a 5-hour flight for every single visiting team. And they played in the Pacific Coast League. Now, maybe at that time, I don't know how far east the Pacific Coast League went. At this time, it goes as far east as Nashville, which is pretty far east.
Yeah.
But Nashville probably, I don't know if they were in the Pacific Coast League back when the Hawaii Islanders played. They played from 1961 through 1987. So that's 26 years that they made that work. They would play like 8-game series against the visiting teams just to make traveling there make sense, you know. But what I was starting to say is one of the difficult things about researching this is finding what might have been the most recent team called the Rangers. And the most recent one I've been able to find was the Pulaski Rangers of the short season Appalachian League. There might have been one since then, but I don't know that there have been one as recently as 2014 when the Huntsville Stars last played. Hey, speaking of the Hawaii Islanders, their alumni included Tony Gwynn, Barry Bonds, and in the broadcast booth, your Philadelphia Phillies, Harry Kalas you're nodding affirmatively. Did you know he was a announcer?
I knew that story. I read his biography actually. So
okay, and also Al Michaels, one of the most famous broadcasters ever. He was an announcer for the Hawaii Islanders. So that happened.
Speaking of the Appalachian League, I was recently on a road trip with my daughter we were looking at colleges, and I went to Burlington, Vermont, and I thought I was hilarious in wearing my Burlington Sock Puppets shirt around Burlington, Vermont, even though the sock puppets obviously are from North Carolina. I thought that was a little subversive joke that I was making there, and Nobody got it. I did get a lot of comments on my Vermont Lake Monsters cap, though.
Okay. What college is in Burlington, Vermont?
The UVM, University of Vermont. And VM, you would think, why is it not UVT? Because that's the abbreviation for Vermont. But it was the Latin for, Vermont. That's not Latin, but the Verdes Montanas or whatever is where the name Vermont comes from. Green Mountains.
So do they have logos that say UVM on them?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You know what? We were talking earlier about how it's a sports branding professional's, job to be aware of as many sports identities that are out there. And I'm not familiar with that team, with their athletic program. What are their teams called?
I had to look it up myself, actually, and their men's soccer team just won the national championship not that long ago. They are the Catamounts.
Oh, I can actually picture that logo now. So somewhere in the deep recesses, I knew that.
One of the other schools that we visited was American University in Washington, D.C., home of the Eagles. And every time they said, welcome future Eagles, I would say under my breath, go Birds. And there's an Eagle logo that, we've talked on this episode about bird logos and birds of prey in particular. It's not the most dynamic Eagle logo. It could use a little refreshing. So, Dan, maybe get on the horn with American University, because if Maya ends up there, I'm going to want to wear a good logo.
I pass American University when I go to visit my son, Casey. It's been mentioned on this podcast, in Washington, D.C. He's no longer 3 years old. He's
That would be negligent parenting if you had sent him to live in Washington, D.C. as a 3-year-old.
Lord have mercy.
I better not go to work today. I'm going to do something really stupid at work. My brain is just not on right now.
I kind of feel the same way about you. I'm kidding.
Dan, it's always fun to hang out and chat about minor league baseball logos with you, and now college and university logos.
So much fun that I hope you ask me back next week.
We will have you back next week. We'll see you again. Dan, have a great week in the meantime.
You too. See you in Stumpville next week.